These images represent some of the major acts of terror in recorded history. Terrorism can be defined as the use of violence and fear to intimidate or coerce. Unfortunately, terrorism has a long and storied history around the world. Sometimes terror is used for revolution. Other times it is used for power and oppression. Terror has even been used for personal ideologies. Although all of these events have extremely different leaders, locations, and motivations, they all were affected in some way by media.
It was the first front in the war on terror.
Media can be defined as a means of communication that reach or influence people widely. Historically, media only played a minor role in terrorism because of limited technology. But in the 20th century, due to globalization and many technological advances, media became integral to daily life. Things like radio and television revolutionized the sharing of information. It was the beginning of mass media. This changed the relationships between media and terror forever. This documentary will explore 20th century media and the ways that different kinds of media facilitate terrorism. Media can intentionally facilitate terrorism or unintentionally facilitate terrorism. In the early 20th century, the leaders of the Soviet Union used a massive propaganda campaign that lasted several decades to promote the ideals of the Communist Party. This campaign is a perfect example of media intentionally facilitating terrorism. That propaganda was designed and implemented by terrorists to create a culture of fear that prevented dissent. Their goal was to further solidify Soviet dominance. At the end of the century, the explosion of mass media resulted in a general desensitization of society. This provoked terrorists to execute increasingly dramatic events to capture more media attention. This campaign is a perfect example of media unintentionally facilitating terrorism. Mass media was designed to provide information on current news to a vast audience. But since terrorists' ultimate goal is increased publicity, and news stations' ultimate goal is interesting journalism, terrorists and mass media have a complicated relationship. This relationship is best described by Peter Newman in Old and New Terrorism. He says, quote, "The relationship between terrorists and the media has become virtually symbiotic, with terrorists eager to provide the mystery, quick action tension, and drama for which the big television networks were longing."
Since media now facilitates the near-instant communication of information and news, the global community was constantly connected, so terrorism became easier to globalize. From the 1980s to present day, the world has only increased its appetite for and consumption of media. The world today, as a whole, has become desensitized to many extremes. Most notably, the extreme violence that pervades movies, video games, and television. Terrorists have responded by performing acts of violence on a level unprecedented in history. Modern terrorists use the media as a channel to spread their ideas on a global scale. In the case of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, he realized the potential role of mass media in order to terrorize and spread his philosophy, targeting major national newspapers. After graduating Harvard, receiving his PhD at UMichigan, and working as an assistant professor at UC Berkeley, he decided to drop his modern life and built a cabin in the woods of Montana and tried to live a primitive, self-sustainable lifestyle. He claimed that man was trapped in a system where he was not able to make his own choices, but rather the opportunities were provided for him by the system itself. Thus, he believed mankind was not free at all, but actually enslaved by technology and modernity. He reached out to major media outlets claiming he would end his terrorist campaign if his manifesto was published in a major journal or newspaper. Thus, Kaczynski used terror to get the attention of the media, and then manipulated the media into publishing his philosophy. Through the expansion of technology and the development of film, People have become numb to violence and the spectacle. Due to new cinematic blurs of reality, incredibly gruesome point-of-view games, and constant violence on the news, society is even more desensitized than ever before. Repeating history, terrorists again responded to increased desensitization with increased depravity. The media set the stage for one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in world history, the attacks on the World Trade Centers on September 11, 2001. 9/11 produced over 3,000 casualties and was so violent, symbolic, and drastic because of the tolerance we have developed for violence as a result of technology and modernity. The Twin Towers were perfect targets for al-Qaeda because of what they represent. They were the two tallest buildings in New York City, the most densely urbanized city in the United States. Additionally, they were located in the financial district in Manhattan and functioned as a symbol of the world economy. Thus, the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers served as symbolic violence, which cannot exist without a proper audience. The media is an agent that perpetuates terrorism. Within several minutes of the first attack, every news station in America had footage of the event, and within one day, an entire nation was notified of their vulnerability.
The woman 120 181st Street.